Hi everyone, thank you for tuning into this video. Today we're going to talk about the 5 stages of the visa process. If you've tuned into one of our webinars, if you've spoken to one of my colleagues, they probably would have taken you through these 5 stages already. So I'm going to bring it up on screen, you're going to have a look through, right? So you can see here that there's 5 stages. One stage has to come before the next. From stage 1 to 5, you have to do one at a time, right? The only difference is that if you look at stage number 3, which is labeled state application, subclass 190 and 491, that stage is specifically for the subclass 190 and 491 state nominated visas only. For the subclass 189, you can skip that stage. So we'll go through each of the stages a little bit at a time and just give you some brief information about it, which you should have already gone through either in one of our webinars or through with one of my colleagues. Stage number 1 is the occupation assessment. There are about 420 occupations on the skilled occupation list, and each of those occupations has a predefined assessing authority, or a government/private entity whose job it is to assess occupations. You can't self-claim an occupation, you have to prove it with documentary evidence. Typically the kind of things they look for are reference letters, proof of payment of salary so that you weren't working for free. Sometimes an English test is required, most of the time English test isn't required. And obviously they need to check that your academic qualifications are at the minimum level for that occupation. So that's stage number 1 in a nutshell. It takes approximately 2 to 3 months to get stage number 1 done. Stage number 2, or the expression of interest. Now this is the first time that you actually have let's call it an account with the Australian government or the Department of Home Affairs. In stage number 1, because you're dealing with these government and private entities, you don't actually exist in Australia's government systems. At this stage you do. At stage number 2, which is the expression of interest, you're making an official expression of interest, hence the name, to the Australian government. And what happens at this stage is that you have to claim all your points, you have to claim your occupation, your age, and so on and so forth. Everything that you do here is important, because if you claim it incorrectly, it does have a knock-on effect down the line. Now, the expression of interest is usually referred to as the pool of applicants, meaning that you are in the expression of interest pool with everybody else who has the same occupation as you, who has different point scores as you, who is applying for different visas than yourself as well. So they might be applying for the same visa as you, or they might be applying for very different visas than you. But they all exist in this expression of interest pool. Most of the weighting for these types of visas is done in the expression of interest pool. Subclass 189, 190, 491, which are the typical skilled migration visas, they all go into this pool, and you have to wait until you get selected out of the pool. Stage number 3, which I mentioned is optional, is for subclass 190 and 491. So if you're applying for the subclass 189, you skip stage number 3, which is the state nomination part. Stage number 3, the state nomination stage. State nomination stage is required only for the subclasses 190 and 491, as both of these are state nominated visas. At this stage, you have to apply through one of Australia's different states. So Australia has a federal government and various state governments. And some of these state governments, they have different occupation lists, meaning they take from the main occupation lists, but they highlight a few of the occupations that they'd like to have more of. So some states may say, I'd like more engineers. Some other states may say, I'd like more IT professionals, and so on and so forth. So the state occupation lists, they open, they close throughout the year. They're not always open in one state, they're not always closed in another. So some states they open, some states they close. A lot of careful monitoring is required to get this stage done correctly. But basically, this stage is where you apply to whatever state is open for your occupation and where you fulfill all the requirements for that state. Many of these states have very different requirements, different ways of applying to them as well. And so as a migration agency, that's one of our main jobs. It's to carefully monitor a lot of these states as things happen, and things do happen throughout the year. Now, once you get selected from the pool of applicants, once you get selected out of this state nomination pool, then you can proceed to the next step. So remember, a state has to select you out of this pool if you're applying for the subclass 190 and 491. The 4th stage is called the invitation to apply stage. Now, if you remember in previous discussions or through one of our webinars, the age limit for the skilled migration program is 45 years old. But the 45-year-old age is not determined when you start the application. It's actually determined when you hit this stage. Meaning you have to go from the start until stage number 4 before they lock in your age. So if you're like 2 days away from your 45th birthday and you haven't started your application yet, then you don't have enough time to get through stages 1, 2, and 3 if necessary to get through stage number 4. So some of those things you have to keep in mind. At stage number 4, the invitation to apply stage, a couple of things happen. Your points are locked in. Your age is locked in. You're about 90 to 95% of the way through the entire visa process. A couple of very important steps need to be taken here before your visa is granted. Number 1, you have to get a police clearance for anywhere you've lived for more than 12 months in the last 10 years. Number 2, you have to go for a medical checkup. They're looking for serious illnesses only, things like HIV, cancer, AIDS, and so on. And number 3, which is probably the most important, is that you have to provide documents to prove all of the points that you claimed at the expression of interest stage, which is why I say the stage number 2, the expression of interest stage, that's a really important stage. If you claim the points incorrectly, you can get penalized here. If you claim too few points, you may not even reach this stage. We've had clients who have submitted expression of interest themselves, but the points were too low. So we took their applications, we adjusted the points that they were allowed to legally claim, and they got their invitation to apply much faster than when they were doing it themselves. At stage number 4, invitation to apply, you're pretty much almost there. Your visa is on the verge of being granted. Finally, stage number 5, or the visa grant. This is when your invitation to apply has been submitted, your documents have been processed, and finally the case officer in the Department of Home Affairs has issued your grant of your visa. Now, once your visa is granted, a couple of things happen. Number 1, you have approximately 12 months to enter Australia once. When I say enter Australia once, it doesn't matter what part of Australia you go to, but you have to clear immigration, then you can turn around and leave again if you want to, but most people, they take a short holiday, or if they're really moving there for good at that time, they can do that as well. But regardless of which visa you've applied for, which visa you've been granted, you have to enter Australia in approximately 12 months. Now, if you've applied for subclass 189 or 190, which is permanent residency applications, you have a total of 5 years to make your permanent move to Australia, approximately 5 years. If you're applying for the subclass 491, you have approximately 2 years to make your permanent move to Australia because that visa has specific stay conditions. But regardless of which visa you apply for, all 3 of these visas come with stay rights, work rights, and unlimited entry for those 5 years. So those are the 5 stages of the visa process, which we've gone through in webinars, and if you've talked to any of my colleagues, they probably would have gone through that as well. But if you haven't talked to anybody at Austral about how this works and you'd like to sit down and go through a point score, what occupations are best for you, what visa types are best for you, and then go through this visa process again in more detail, please use the links below in the description and one of us will be in contact. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please stay tuned until the next one. Thanks for your time.